The Vatican City, a place of unparalleled history, of faith that spans millennia, and of secrets whispered in ancient stone. Most people think of grand basilicas, bustling squares, or the hushed reverence of the Sistine Chapel. But tucked away, almost swallowed by the shadow of St. Peter's, is a place few tourists ever find, and fewer still ever truly understand. I'm talking about the Campo Santo Teutonico, the German-speaking Catholic cemetery. And for a year, it was my second home, a home that never truly let me leave. My name is Marcus, and I was an archaeology student, given the incredible privilege of assisting with a cataloging project of the cemetery's older tombstones and crypts. It was a dream assignment, to walk among centuries of history, to trace the names of pilgrims and soldiers who had journeyed to Rome and found their final rest within these hallowed, yet somehow forgotten grounds. The Campo Santo isn't like other cemeteries. It's small, secluded, encircled by high walls, an oasis of ancient quiet amidst the eternal city's chaos. The air inside always felt different, cooler, heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. At first, it was simply beautiful. The old gravestones, some barely legible, leaning at odd angles, covered in moss and ivy. The small, medieval church at its heart. The towering cypress trees that whispered secrets to the wind. I spent my days meticulously documenting, sketching, photographing. My nights, though, became something else entirely. Due to the sensitive nature of some crypts and a need for undisturbed work, I often found myself there after the last of the daytime visitors had left, working until the early hours of the morning, illuminated only by the focused beam of my headlamp and the distant glow of the basilica's dome. That's when the subtle things began. The cold spots were the first. Not a general chill, but distinct pockets of icy air that would drift past me, sudden and sharp, even on the warmest nights. I'd be leaning over an ancient ledger, engrossed in deciphering faded Latin, and a wave of profound cold would wash over my hands, making my fingers tingle. I'd look up, expecting a draft, a sudden shift in the wind, but the air around me would be perfectly still. I dismissed it as the old stone walls, the deep shade from the trees, the natural cooling of the night air. The cemetery, after all, was supposed to be a little eerie. Then came the peripheral movements. Fleeting shadows, just at the edge of my vision. A flicker behind a tall monument, a brief shape melting into the darkness between two crypts. I'd snap my head around, my heart giving a little lurch, but there would be nothing. Just the silent gravestones, the swaying branches. My mind playing tricks, I tell myself. Fatigue from long hours. The way moonlight can dance and create illusions. And the sounds. Distant murmurs like the hum of a faraway crowd, or the sigh of the wind through dry leaves, but subtly off. It wasn't a natural sound. It was resonant. Like voices, muffled by distance and time, speaking a language I almost, but never quite understood. I'd strain my ears trying to distinguish words, but they would always fade into the background hum of the city, or simply cease, leaving me to wonder if I'd heard anything at all. I was a man of science, of logic. Every anomaly, I reasoned, had a rational explanation. The Campo Santo was an ancient place, steeped in history. Of course it would feel eerie. Of course my mind would conjure things in the profound quiet. But the unease, like the tendrils of the ivy that clung to the stone walls, slowly, insidiously began to creep into my very being. I found myself checking over my shoulder more often, listening more intently to the silence, my rational mind fighting a losing battle against a primal, growing dread. The incidents began to escalate after about a month. The whispers were no longer just distant murmurs. They were closer, more distinct, though still frustratingly unintelligible. They sounded like archaic German, snippets of Latin, even Old Italian. It was a cacophony of voices, sometimes overlapping, sometimes distinct, but always just beyond my comprehension. I'd be kneeling by a tomb, cleaning away centuries of grime, and a clear whisper would seem to brush past my ear, chilling me to the bone. It was like standing in a crowded room where everyone was speaking at once, except the room was empty, and the voices were coming from nowhere, everywhere. Then came the visual manifestations that I couldn't simply dismiss. The shadow figures. They were no longer just fleeting glimpses. I started seeing them with disturbing clarity, though never fully formed. A tall, cloaked figure standing by a crucifix, only to vanish when I blinked. A smaller, hunched shape, like an old woman, kneeling beside a grave, her presence dissolving like smoke in the moonlight. I once swore I saw a figure in what looked like medieval armor, a helmeted head briefly appearing from behind a large marble slab, before receding back into the deep shadows. They were always just out of reach, just beyond complete definition, like a half-remembered dream. But they were undeniably there. One night, as I was working on a particularly intricate inscription, a sharp clink echoed from the crypt beside me, like metal striking stone. My heart leaped into my throat. I froze, my headlamp beam shaking slightly as I swung it towards the sound. Nothing. The crypt door was sealed shut, the heavy stone undisturbed. But the distinct metallic clang had been undeniable. It was followed by a faint, desperate sigh, a sound of profound sorrow that seemed to emanate from within the very earth beneath my feet. My skepticism was crumbling. This wasn't just my imagination anymore. The cold spots intensified, becoming so profound that I could see my breath fog in air, even indoors. They would envelop me, thick and suffocating, making my teeth chatter. The voices started to call my name. Not clearly, not like a living person, but a drawn-out, distorted whisper. My name stretched and warped, like wind howling through a broken window. It would come from all directions at once, disorienting me, making me spin around frantically, trying to pinpoint its source. It was a sound designed to drive you mad. Sleep became a distant memory. Every night, I would lie in bed, my mind replaying the day's encounters, dissecting every shadow, every sound. I started leaving the lights on, needing the harsh reality of their glow to fend off the creeping dread. The Campo Santo wasn't just eerie anymore. It was an active, malevolent presence, slowly, deliberately trying to get my attention, to draw me deeper into its chilling embrace. I began to feel a distinct pull towards specific graves. My research, which had been purely academic, took on a new, unsettling dimension. I would find myself drawn to certain burial plots, feeling an inexplicable urge to look closer, to read the faded inscriptions, to uncover the lives of the dead. It was as if the spirits themselves were guiding my hand, whispering their stories to me through the stone. I started researching the history of the Campo Santo with a new fervor, not just for my project, but for my sanity. I devoured old records, trying to understand the individuals buried there, the Crusader Knights, the German students, the exiled pilgrims. Each name, each date, each forgotten life felt like a thread pulling me deeper into their world. There was one particular section, a cluster of ancient, weather-beaten stones near the back wall, where the air was always impossibly cold and the whispers were strongest. It felt like a crossroads, a nexus of lingering souls. I saw them there most often, the cloaked figures, the faint outlines of medieval soldiers standing guard, their forms appearing and disappearing with dizzying speed. It was here, one storm-lashed night, that the haunting truly began to take hold of me. The wind howled through the cypress trees, a mournful lament. Rain lashed against the ancient walls, drumming on the mausoleums. My headlamp flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced like tortured spirits. I was trying to secure some loose protective sheeting over a newly excavated area, battling against the elements, my nerves frayed. The cold was unbearable, seeping into my bones, and the air crackled with a palpable energy. Then the cacophony began. Not just whispers, but a chorus of disembodied voices, rising in intensity. Cries of anguish, prayers in ancient tongues, the distinct clang of metal, the guttural shouts of battle. I heard the desperate sobs of a woman, the terrified whimper of a child. It was as if every tragic event, every moment of pain, every forgotten sorrow from centuries of burials, was replaying itself around me, an auditory haunting of overwhelming proportion. And then I saw them, not as fleeting shadows, but almost solid. Spectral figures swirling around me, translucent but distinct. Soldiers in rusted armor, their faces gaunt, their eyes burning with a timeless despair. Pilgrims in tattered cloaks, their hands clasped in eternal prayer, their forms shimmering like heat haze. A woman, her face streaked with unseen tears, stood beside a small, unmarked grave, her body racked with silent sobs. They weren't just replaying the past. They were aware. I felt their gaze, their collective despair pressing down on me. The cold intensified to an unbearable degree, freezing the air in my lungs. It was like being submerged in an icy ocean, the weight of countless unseen bodies pressing in from all sides. I was no longer an observer. I was trapped in their midst, assaulted by their eternal suffering. Then, from the cluster of ancient stones where the cold was most profound, a figure began to emerge, slowly coalescing from the swirling mist of spectral forms. It was a tall, stooped man, clad in what looked like the simple robes of a medieval pilgrim, a long staff held loosely in his translucent hand. His face, though still indistinct, seemed to carry an expression of profound weariness, of unending journey. He began to move towards me, slowly, deliberately, his form growing more solid with each step, until he was standing just feet away. The other voices faded, replaced by a single, low, resonant whisper that seemed to emanate from the very air around him, directly into my mind. It wasn't in any language I understood, yet its meaning was terrifyingly clear, seeping into my soul like ice water. It was a plea, a lament, a demand. He raised his translucent hand, its fingers long and skeletal, and pointed towards an old, broken sundial near the small church. Then the words formed in my mind, not in Latin, not in German, but in a clear, chilling voice that resonated with centuries of despair. The time, it is broken. We cannot rest. We wait. You are here for us. Help us. The sundial. I had dismissed its broken state as mere decay. But in that moment, illuminated by the spectral light of the pilgrim, I understood. The spirits weren't just lingering. They were trapped. They were caught in a loop of eternal suffering, unable to move on, unable to find peace because something was broken. The sundial, a symbol of time, its brokenness a metaphor for their inability to progress. They weren't just haunting the Campo Santo. They were the Campo Santo. Their endless waiting, their replayed agonies, their desperate pleas for release. And I, the rational archaeologist, had stumbled into their eternal prison, their one chance. The cold spots, the whispers, the fleeting figures, they weren't just manifestations, they were their physical presence, their attempts to break through, to find a way out, to use me. I wasn't just observing. I was now part of their torment, a vessel for their unending pleas. They wanted release, and they believed I was the key. The pilgrim's hand, still outstretched, seemed to reach for me, its touch an unimaginable cold that promised to draw me into its eternal stasis. My entire being screamed to break free, to run, to escape the crushing weight of their despair. But the force of their collective sorrow, their desperate hope, was almost physical, binding me to the spot. I don't know how I broke free. A primal, animalistic scream tore from my throat, raw and desperate. I turned and ran, blindly stumbling through the rain-soaked cemetery, past the ancient tombs, through the swirling spectral figures, their pleas echoing in my mind. I didn't stop until I burst through the heavy iron gate, slamming it shut behind me with a desperate clang, and collapsed onto the ancient cobblestones outside, gasping for breath, the rain washing over my face, trying to wash away the icy grip that still clung to my soul. I finished my project, but I never set foot in the Campo Santo after dark again. And I rarely even approach its gates during the day. My colleagues joke that I got Vatican fever. They don't know the half of it. My sleep is still restless, haunted by the whispers and the distinct, unbearable cold that still creeps into my room, even on the warmest nights. I hear the faintest echoes of those ancient voices, the clink of unseen metal, the desolate sigh of endless waiting. I feel the weight of their gaze. The Campo Santo Teutonico still stands, its secrets locked within its ancient walls. The reports continue, I'm sure. Visitors and staff still experience the unexplained. They see the figures, hear the voices, feel the sudden cold. But they don't understand the terrifying truth that the spirits aren't just haunting the cemetery. They are trapped within it. And they are desperate. They are waiting. and they're calling out forever. And I'm Marco, and one of the few who answered and lived to tell the tale. But some part of me, I fear, still lingers with them, forever unable to truly leave the cemetery that wouldn't let go. If you've ever felt the past reaching out to you, or visited a place where the dead refuse to rest, tell me about it in the comments below.